Looking at the commanding view enjoyed as one stands on the brow of Primrose Hill, it's easy to see why the great Welsh bardic scholar Iolo Morgannwg chose to revive the ancient Druidic Gorsedd at this spot on the summer solstice of the year 1792.
The landscape in which Iolo Morgannwg was to revive Welsh bardism in the spirit of Tom Paine's revolutionary writings on the rights of man was to influence the poetry of William Blake, another of those similarly influenced by the Ossianic poems of James Macpherson and the antiquarian drawings of William Stukeley. Here at Kew, close to the church in which George III's secret marriage to Hannah Lightfoot is said to have taken place, the Enlightenment intellectualism of the Scottish philosophers looked to the institution of constitutional monarchy as a bulwark against absolutist despotism, a political concept rooted in the conflicts of the English Civil War. The idea of a monarchy unable to interfere in the democratic workings of Parliament was formulated by great parliamentarian luminaries such as Hampden and Cromwell in the wake of the disastrous Royalist defeat at Worcester. Just a few hundred yards from Kew Palace stands the western boundary of the London landscape in which many of these ideas were originally discussed. In the shadow of Oliver's 8 stands the historic Riverside Inn, where Cromwell was besieged by Royalist pursuers, and just a few miles downstream, on either side of the Saxon Ford directly adjacent to the old Cromwell family brewery and fulling mill, stand the twin churches of Putney and Fulham. Curiously, this apparently Christian ecclesiastical landscape has links to a far more ancient series of prehistoric ritual centres, as close scrutiny of the matrix of ley lines which crisscross the entire locality will show. Here on nearby Putney Heath, the presence of a vast prehistoric structure, in all probability a Druidic moot hill or place of assembly, where ancient democratic processes were enacted before bardic judges, gives possible strength to the idea that Cromwell's own political influences may have been rooted in something far more ancient than has previously been supposed by most modern writers and commentators. The alignment between it and nearby Putney Church is clearly visible, and the additional fact that the entire area is traversed with an abundance of prehistoric trackways lends further credence to this assertion. Iolo Morgannwg's idea that the Druids practiced some sort of primitive democracy is borne out in the writings of Julius Caesar. Taking this into account, it is perhaps significant that Caesar may well have had inside information on the sacred geography of Britain, a fact which is borne out by recent evidence unearthed by John Michel and Robin Heath in their book The Measure of Albion. Perhaps it is something more than coincidental then that nearby Caesar's camp on Wimbledon Common is at the centre of a major series of prehistoric alignments. Cromwell's circle would also appear to have had similar links of their own with a number of ritual landscapes not unlike those on Putney Heath and Wimbledon Common. John Hampden's Buckinghamshire family seat lies not so very far from Willesden on the summer solstice line and is linked to Glastonbury Tor, Avebury Ring and Stonehenge. Hampden was a key figure in the parliamentary movement and was related to Cromwell himself. So is it mere chance that Hampden House is directly aligned to Stoke Mandeville on the Great Dragon Line, thus connecting it to Glastonbury's Temple of the Stars? At Fulham, a curious series of little understood legends with origins lost in the mists of time provide proof that Cromwell's political ideas could have been influenced by some knowledge of ancient rite and ritual. Centering on the church-building activities of a pair of sisterly giants, the legends were recovered by Kingston-based author and historian Mary Kane, who has linked them to an ancient ritual landscape centred on the Saxon settlement at Kingston itself and referred to as the Kingston Zodiac. This vast ritual landscape several miles across is the urban London equivalent of the Glastonbury Zodiac, discovered by Catherine Maltwood in the 1920s. Like its Somerset counterpart, it is visible from the air, consisting of a series of gigantic landscape effigies shaped and bounded by a network of roads, rivers, natural features and man-made earthworks. In its very centre stands the King's Stone, an ancient prehistoric megalithic relic, used in coronation ritual and composed of similar materials to parts of Stonehenge. Of supposed Saxon origin, nearby local inn signs point to Druid links. Used in St Dunstan's semi-electoral coronation ceremonies, the King's Stone itself provides us with direct clues for a connection with the ancient bardic democracy of Iolo Morganwg. Here at the gates of Dunstan's former Bishop's Palace, itself located directly adjacent to Fulham Church, a pair of prehistoric-looking stones provide archaeological substance for a link between Fulham, Kingston and the ancient megalithic culture responsible for the construction of Avebury and Stonehenge. As Stukely was to discover during the course of his early archaeological fieldwork at both of these major ritual centres, many of the stones themselves appear to have been broken up to provide building materials for later, more modern buildings. Were the remains of some ancient prehistoric stone circle smashed up and used in the construction of Dunstan's Bishop's Palace and Putney and Fulham's churches, just as this building at Avebury was built with materials from the nearby Henge monument. At neighbouring Wayland's Smithy, local mythology provides definite proof of a link between Putney and Fulham. The tale of Wayland the Smith recounts his casting of a mighty boulder at his imp apprentice, a legend resurrected by the self-styled guardian of Glastonbury Tor, the late Tony Roberts, in his monumental book on giants. Tony's interest in Mary Cain's Kingston Zodiac was rooted in his own Fulham upbringing, and his subsequent decampment to Glastonbury reflects St Dunstan's own previous connection with both locations. Born at Glastonbury in Somerset, where he was the abbot of Glastonbury Abbey, Dunstan moved up to London's Bishop's Palace after rising to high office. In reverse fashion, Tony turned his back on a career in the mainstream media in return for a less well-paid life of greater literary excellence in the mists of the Somerset levels. The naming of Fulham's elitist Hurlingham Club recalls the legend of how two gigantic sisters built Putney and Fulham's churches with but one hammer, tossing it from one bank to the other to the cries of "Put nigh full home." The breaking of its claws in a subsequent fall recalls those of Kingston's Scorpio effigy, which incorporates Wimbledon's Caesar's Camp into its westernmost fringes. The repair of the giantess's hammer at nearby Hammersmith by a Wayland-like giant of similarly gargantuan proportions is perhaps connected with the extensive pre-Roman local trade in bronze implements. At Hammersmith's Galena Road, a curious convergence of ley lines connects this seemingly barren urban landscape with the rich spiritual heritage of ancient Albion. Although now long since redeveloped, the site was formerly the location of one of London's longest-running urban squats, and the venue for countless social gatherings and street parties. From here, the likes of the now legendary Tibetan-Ukrainian mountain troupe set out for the Stonehenge Free Festival, travelling along fragments of the long-since built-over remains of Britain's prehistoric sacred trackways that connect up with the legendary Great Dragon Line. Thus, the great spiritual centres of Glastonbury, Avebury and Stonehenge link up with the Kingston Zodiac through this hidden geometric matrix of psychic geography.